Humanity. Found an alien fleet sleeping near Mars. Then the human captain made a choice. Best HFY Sci-Fi Stories. The year was 2187, and the United Earth Survey ship Meridian was on a routine mission near Mars. Its job was simple. It mapped small asteroids, checked old mining stations, and made sure no space debris would hit the growing colonies on the red planet. Nothing exciting ever happened on these trips. That was what Captain Elena Reyes liked about them. Elena was 42 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes that still missed nothing. She had spent 20 years in Earth's fleet, first as a young pilot, then as an officer, and now as the captain of her own ship. She was calm most of the time, but her crew knew that under that calm was a mind that never stopped working. It was during the third week of the mission when something strange showed up on the long-range scanners. "Captain, you need to see this," said Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the ship's sensor officer. He was a young man, only 28, but sharp as a blade when it came to reading data. His voice had a small shake in it, the kind that came from finding something you did not expect. Elena walked over to his station. "What is it?" "There's a mass out past Phobos. It's big, really big. Bigger than anything we've mapped in this system before." Marcus pointed at the screen. A large shadow sat on the graph, far larger than any asteroid should be. "At first I thought it was a sensor error. I ran the scan 3 times. Same result every time." Elena leaned closer, studying the numbers herself. Could it be a rogue moon? Something that drifted in from outside the system? "That's what I thought too. But look at the shape." Marcus zoomed in. The shadow was not round like a moon or an asteroid. It had edges, straight lines, corners. The bridge went quiet. Every officer on duty turned to look at the screen. "That's not natural," said Chief Engineer Dana Okoro from her station near the back. Dana was older than most of the crew, with gray streaks in her hair and decades of experience building and fixing ships. She did not scare easily, but her face had gone pale. Nothing in nature makes lines that straight. Elena felt her pulse pick up, though her face stayed calm. "Distance? About 200,000 kilometers from our position. We could reach it in 6 hours at cruising speed," Marcus answered. "Any energy readings? Anything that looks active?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. It's cold, completely cold. No heat signature, no radio noise, nothing. If it wasn't for its size, I would say it's just a dead rock." Elena thought for a moment. Her orders were clear. Any unusual discovery near Earth's territory had to be reported to Earth Defense Command before any action was taken. But something told her this was too important to wait for a report to travel back and forth across the solar system. By the time Command replied, whatever this was could move, or worse, wake up. "Take us closer," she said, slow and quiet. "I want full sensor sweeps every step of the way. And send a message to Command. Tell them what we found. Let them know we're investigating." "Yes, Captain," Marcus said, already typing. The Meridian turned slowly and began moving toward the shadow near Phobos. As the hours passed, more details came into view. The shape was not one object. It was many objects, packed close together, drifting as a group. Some were small, no bigger than a shuttle. Others were massive, far larger than any human ship ever built. "Captain, I'm counting 41 separate hulls," Marcus said, his voice tight with excitement and nerves. "They're arranged in a pattern, almost like a formation, like a fleet that stopped moving." "A fleet," Elena repeated softly. She had read every history book about first contact theories, every science fiction story her grandfather used to tell her as a child. None of them had prepared her for the feeling in her chest right now. It was not just fear. It was wonder, too. "Bring up a visual," she ordered. The main screen flickered, and then the image formed. Even blurred by distance and dust, the sight took the crew's breath away. Ships. Dozens of them, long and curved, covered in a strange dark material that looked almost like stone, but caught starlight in odd ways. Shifting colors from deep purple to black. Ice had formed on many of the hulls. Thick sheets of frozen gas that told a story of many, many years spent doing nothing but drifting in the cold. "They look ancient," Dana whispered. "Look at the ice buildup. That doesn't happen in a few years. That takes centuries." "Centuries," Elena said. "So whoever built these ships has been gone a long, long time. Or asleep. Marcus added quietly. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at him. What do you mean asleep? Elena asked. Marcus pulled up another screen. I picked up something faint, very faint. It's not gone completely. There's a small amount of power still running somewhere deep inside those ships. Like a heartbeat that's almost stopped, but not quite. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying something in there might still be alive. I'm saying something in there might still be on, Marcus said carefully. Whether that means alive, I don't know yet. The Meridian continued its careful approach. As they drew nearer, the true size of the alien fleet became clear. The largest ship stretched almost 5 kilometers from end to end, a vessel so big it made the Meridian look like a child's toy in comparison. Its surface was covered in patterns that seemed to have meaning, symbols carved deep into the hull, though no one on the ship could read them. Captain, look at the formation again, Dana said, studying a new set of readings. These ships aren't just floating together by chance. They're arranged with the biggest ships in the center, and smaller ones around the edges. That's a defensive formation, like a group protecting something important. Or protecting each other, Elena said. It looks like a fleet that came here on purpose. Not one that crashed or got lost. Which means someone chose to stop here, near Mars, near Earth's front door, Dana added, and no one on the bridge liked the sound of that. Elena stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed, thinking hard. Every part of her training told her to be careful, but every part of her that still remembered being a child staring up at the stars told her this was the discovery of a lifetime. Marcus, keep monitoring that faint power signature. Dana, I want a full structural scan of the nearest small ship. If it truly has been sitting here for centuries with nothing active, then it should be safe enough to study from a distance for now. Understood, Dana said. Hours passed as the crew worked. Slowly, a picture began to form. The material covering the ships was unlike anything humans had built. It was tough, almost impossible to scan through in some places, as if it was built to hide what was inside from outside eyes. But in a few spots, cracks and damage from what looked like old battle wounds let the sensors peek through. Captain, I'm reading rows and rows of small chambers inside several of the ships, Dana reported, eyes wide as she studied the results. They're shaped almost like pods, long enough to hold a body. Bodies? Elena repeated. Living or dead? I can't tell for certain from here. But some of them are giving off a very faint heat signature, like something is being kept just barely warm enough to survive. Dana turned to face her captain. Elena, I think these might be stasis pods, like the old cryo-sleep systems we use for long trips, but far more advanced. The bridge was silent again. This was no longer just a strange discovery. This was a fleet of ships, carrying what appeared to be sleeping crew members, sitting quietly near Mars, for what could be hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Send a full report to Earth Defense Command, Elena ordered. Tell them everything we've found. Tell them we believe there may be living beings aboard these vessels, in some kind of long sleep. Request further instructions, but also request permission to send a small boarding team, in case time matters more than we know. Yes, Captain, Marcus said, and began preparing the transmission. It would take several minutes to reach Earth, and then several more for a reply to come back. In the meantime, the Meridian would have to make its own choices. Elena walked to the observation window and looked out at the massive fleet floating silently in the dark. Somewhere out there, inside those ancient hulls, something might be waiting, sleeping, maybe dying slowly, one heartbeat at a time. What do you think happened to them? Asked Ensign Priya Nair, a young science officer standing nearby. She had joined the crew only a year ago, fresh from the academy, and her voice carried the nervous excitement of someone seeing something truly new for the first time. I don't know, Elena admitted, but look at that formation again. Big ships protected by smaller ones, battle damage on several hulls. Whoever they are, I think they were running from something, or fighting something, and they came here, to hide, or to rest. Do you think it's dangerous? Priya asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. Everything unknown is dangerous until we understand it. But that doesn't mean we should be afraid of it. It means we should be careful, and smart, and ready for anything. The reply from Earth Defense Command arrived 4 hours later. It was short and direct. Investigate with extreme caution. Do not attempt to enter any vessel until a specialized team arrives. Estimated arrival time for backup forces, 72 hours. Elena read the message twice, then looked at her crew. 72 hours was a long time to wait, especially if something inside those ships was slowly running out of power, or worse, slowly dying. Captain, if there's really something alive in there, waiting 3 days might mean waiting too long, Dana said quietly, echoing the same thought running through Elena's mind. I know, Elena said. She looked back at the fleet through the window, at the ancient ships drifting silently in the black. But going in without permission could start something we're not ready for. If those beings wake up and see armed strangers already inside their ships, that could be seen as an attack. So what do we do? Marcus asked. Elena thought for a long moment. Then she made her decision, the kind of decision that would define the rest of her career, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. We send a small probe first, unmanned, no weapons, just cameras and sensors. If it finds a way inside safely, without triggering anything dangerous, then we'll know more before Command's team even arrives. If anything shows signs of danger, we pull back immediately and wait for backup. That's still against direct orders, Dana pointed out, though she did not sound like she disagreed with the plan. Command said not to enter any vessel, Elena said. A small probe isn't a person entering. It's a tool taking a look. I'll take responsibility for that decision. The crew worked through the night preparing the probe. It was a simple machine, about the size of a large dog, built with small thrusters, bright lights, and several types of sensors. It was meant for exploring asteroids and old wreckage, not ancient alien fleets, but it would have to do. The probe launched just before dawn, its thrusters pushing it slowly and carefully toward the smallest ship in the formation, a vessel about the size of a large shuttlecraft, sitting near the edge of the group. Probe is approaching the outer hull, Marcus reported, watching the video feed carefully. I see the damage now. There's a large crack near what looks like an entry point, big enough for the probe to slip through. Send it in slowly, Elena said. Full sensors active. I want to see everything it sees. The probe drifted through the crack, its lights cutting through total darkness inside the ancient hull. The crew watched the video feed in silence, holding their breath as the picture came into focus. Inside, the ship was hollow and cold, its corridors lined with strange markings that glowed faintly, just barely enough to be seen. Dust and ice covered every surface, floating gently in the absence of gravity. The probe moved deeper, its camera catching glimpses of broken equipment, strange machines with no clear purpose, and long empty hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. Then it found the first pod. There, Priya said, pointing at the screen. Right there, Captain. The pod was long, shaped almost like an oval, made of the same dark material as the ship's hull. A soft light pulsed slowly inside it, on and off, like a heartbeat. Frost covered the outer surface, but through a small clear panel near the top, something could be seen inside. It was hard to make out clearly. Details were blurred by ice and shadow, but the shape was unmistakable. It had a head, and what looked like limbs, folded carefully inside the pod. It was not human. The proportions were wrong, the shape too long in some places and too narrow in others. But it was clearly a living being, or had been once. Oh my God, Priya whispered. Elena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This was it, actual proof. Not just old ships and cold metal, but an actual alien being, resting inside a pod, possibly still alive after who knew how many years. Get me a closer look, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts running through her mind. The probe drifted closer, its light shining directly onto the pod's surface. As the light touched the frost-covered panel, something happened that none of the crew expected. The soft, pulsing light inside the pod suddenly grew brighter. Captain, the pod's power signature just spiked, Marcus shouted, watching his readings jump wildly. Something's happening in there. The frost on the panel began to melt, slowly, as heat spread from somewhere deep within the pod. The shape inside began to shift, ever so slightly, as if stirring from a long, long sleep. Pull the probe back, Elena ordered immediately. Now. But it was too late. Whatever had been sleeping inside that ancient pod for who knew how many centuries was waking up. And on the bridge of the Meridian, every single crew member stared at the screen in stunned silence. watching as history began to change right before their eyes. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound on the bridge was the soft hum of the ship's systems and the quiet beeping of Marcus's sensor console as it tracked the rising energy inside the ancient pod. Elena's mind raced through every possible outcome. Perhaps the being inside was harmless, simply an old traveler stirred awake after a long rest. Or perhaps it was something far more dangerous, a guardian meant to protect the fleet from intruders, now alerted to their presence. "Captain, should I recall the probe completely?" Marcus asked, his hand hovering over the controls. "Not yet," Elena said. "If we pull back too fast, we might miss something important. Keep it steady at a safe distance. Full sensor sweep, and Priya, I want you watching for any sign of aggressive behavior. Anything at all." "Yes, Captain," Priya said, though her voice shook slightly. The minutes stretched on like hours. The pod's light pulsed steadily now, no longer flickering weakly, but glowing with a strong, steady rhythm. Whatever was inside seemed to be stabilizing, its long sleep finally ending after what could have been centuries. Dana studied her own readings carefully, cross-checking the ship's structural scans against the sudden power surge. "Captain, I'm seeing similar faint activity starting in at least 6 other pods nearby. It's like waking one triggered some kind of chain reaction. A safety system, maybe, designed to slowly bring others back once the first one stirs. Or a warning system," Elena said quietly, "telling the others that someone is here." She thought of the risks involved. If this truly was some kind of automated defense response, they could be in serious danger. But if it was simply the natural process of long-delayed cryosleep finally ending, then the beings deep inside these ships were nothing more than survivors, finally waking after a terrible ordeal. "Let's give it space," Elena decided. "Marcus, hold the probe exactly where it is. No sudden movements. We wait and we watch." They did not have to wait much longer. Slowly, cautiously, the being inside the pod pushed itself upright, moving with the stiff, careful motions of someone whose muscles had not been used in a very long time. Even through the grainy video feed, the crew could see it was struggling, its long limbs trembling with the effort. "It looks weak," Priya whispered. "Maybe it's been in there longer than we think. Maybe most of its strength is gone." Elena felt a strange pull in her chest, something between caution and sympathy. Whatever this being was, wherever it had come from, it did not look like a monster or a threat in that moment. It looked exhausted, fragile, and very much alone. Hours passed as the crew continued monitoring the situation from a careful distance, sending updates back to Earth as often as they could. Command's reply eventually arrived, cautious but curious, asking for continuous updates, and reminding Elena that the specialized team was still on its way, though its arrival now felt impossibly far off, given how quickly things were changing near Mars. By the time the alien fully stood on its own, moving slowly through the corridor toward the source of the probe's light, night had fallen over the parts of Earth still facing the sun, though of course there was no such thing as day or night out here in the endless black between the stars. Only the ship's clocks marked the passage of time, counting down toward whatever would come next. Elena remained on the bridge long after her shift should have ended, unwilling to leave the situation in anyone else's hands. She thought about her own family back on Earth, her younger brother who worked as a teacher in what used to be called the Midwest, her mother who still lived in the small coastal town where Elena had grown up dreaming of the stars. She wondered what they would think if they could see this moment, an ancient alien, slowly waking from a centuries-long sleep, reaching out toward a small human probe, as if it were the only friendly face left in the universe. "Captain," Dana said softly, breaking the silence. "You should get some rest. We'll wake you the moment anything changes." "I'm not tired," Elena said, though the heaviness behind her eyes told a different story. "You're no good to this crew running on empty," Dana said gently. "Trust us to keep watch for a few hours." Elena finally relented, though sleep did not come easily. She lay in her small quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of that ancient being, reaching toward the probe's light, over and over in her mind. There was something deeply human about that gesture, something that crossed the boundary between species entirely. A creature waking after unimaginable loss, reaching instinctively toward warmth and light, toward the possibility of not being alone anymore. She woke a few hours later to an urgent knock on her door. It was Marcus, his face pale but excited. "Captain, You need to come to the bridge right away. It's trying to communicate with the probe directly. Elena was on her feet in seconds, pulling on her uniform jacket as she hurried through the corridors. When she reached the bridge, the entire crew was gathered around the main screen, watching intently as the alien being stood close to the probe, one long hand resting gently against its outer casing. It's been standing like that for almost 10 minutes, Priya explained quickly. Not moving, not attacking, just touching it, like it's trying to understand what the probe is. Elena studied the screen carefully. The being's dark eyes seemed to catch the probe's light in a way that almost looked thoughtful, intelligent, deliberate. This was no mindless animal reacting on instinct. This was a creature capable of complex thought, studying an unfamiliar object with careful curiosity. Prepare full translation protocols, Elena ordered. If it tries to communicate again, I want us ready to respond immediately. The bridge crew scrambled into position, hearts pounding with anticipation. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would mark humanity's first true conversation with an intelligent alien species, a moment that would be remembered and studied for generations to come, no matter how it unfolded. Elena took a steadying breath, straightened her shoulders, and stepped closer to the main console, ready to speak the first words humanity would ever offer to the survivors of a civilization far older and far more scarred by war than her own. Whatever came next, she intended to make sure those words carried nothing but honesty, respect, and the hope of friendship, rather than fear. The being on the screen tilted its head slightly, as if sensing the shift in attention from the small machine before it, and slowly, deliberately, it opened its mouth to speak. Humanity found an alien fleet sleeping near Mars. Then the human captain made a choice. Best HFY Sci-Fi Stories. The pod's light kept growing brighter, and the shape inside kept moving, small twitches at first, then stronger. On the Meridian's bridge, no one moved, no one breathed. They simply watched the screen, seeing something that had not happened in who knew how many years. Marcus, pull the probe back to a safe distance, but keep the cameras on, Elena said, her voice low and steady, even though her heart was racing. I want to watch this, but I don't want to be the reason something goes wrong. Yes, Captain, Marcus said, working the controls carefully. The probe backed away slowly, giving the pod room, but still close enough to record everything. For nearly 10 minutes, nothing more happened. The being inside the pod simply moved a little, then stopped, then moved again. It was like watching someone slowly wake from the deepest sleep of their life, unsure yet if they were truly awake or still dreaming. Then, without warning, the pod's outer shell split open along a hidden seam, releasing a small cloud of frozen gas into the dark corridor. The alien inside did not fall out. It simply lay there, as if the pod itself had decided it was time. Life signs? Elena asked. Reading something, Priya said, eyes glued to her screen. Heartbeat, or whatever passes for one in this species. Slow, but steady. Brain activity, if that's what it is, rising quickly. It's waking up, Dana said quietly. After all this time. Elena felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. She was the captain of this ship, and whatever happened next would be shaped by the choices she made in the next few minutes. She thought about calling command again, waiting for new orders, but she knew that would take hours, and the situation in front of her was changing by the second. Keep recording everything, she said, and prepare the translator unit. If that being wakes up fully, we need to be ready to try to communicate. The Meridian carried a basic translator device, built by Earth scientists using patterns from years of studying radio signals sent by unknown sources deep in space. It had never been tested on an actual living alien before. No one knew if it would work at all. Over the next hour, the being inside the ancient ship slowly came back to life. It moved its limbs, tested them, seemed confused by the darkness and cold around it. Then, using controls built into the wall near its pod, it activated a series of small lights along the corridor, filling the space with a soft blue glow. It's operating the ship's systems, Marcus said, surprised. After all this time, it still remembers how everything works. Or the ship is helping it remember, Elena said. Either way, it's not confused for long. The being began to move through the ship, slowly at first, then with more confidence. The probe followed at a careful distance, capturing every detail of its journey. It walked upright on two legs, though its body was longer and thinner than a human's, with skin that looked almost like smooth gray stone, and large dark eyes that seemed built for seeing in dim light. Its hands had 4 long fingers instead of 5, each one moving with careful precision as it touched panels and controls throughout the ship. "It's checking the ship," Dana observed. "Look how it moves from station to station. It's not wandering. It's inspecting things, like a crew member doing rounds." The being eventually reached a large chamber near the center of the small vessel, a room filled with more pods, dozens of them, all still dark and silent. It stood in front of them for a long moment, simply looking, and something in its posture made Elena's chest tighten with an emotion she had not expected to feel toward an alien: sadness. "I think those other pods have stopped working," Priya said softly. "Look at the lights. They're all dark. Only the one it came from was still active." "So it might be the only one who survived," Elena said. "The only one left, out of everyone on this ship." The being turned suddenly, as if sensing something, and looked directly toward the corridor where the probe was hovering. For a long moment, it simply stared at the small machine, studying it with obvious intelligence in its posture. "It knows we're here," Marcus said. "Send a simple signal," Elena ordered. "Nothing aggressive, just a basic light pattern, something to show we mean no harm." Marcus quickly worked the probe's controls, causing its outer lights to flash gently in a slow, calm pattern. The being watched, then, after a moment, moved closer to the probe. It reached out one long hand and touched the machine gently, almost curiously. Then it spoke. The sound was strange, a mix of low clicks and soft tones that carried through the ship's thin air and into the probe's audio sensors. The crew on the Meridian listened, stunned, as the first words from a living alien reached human ears. "Run it through the translator," Elena said quickly. It took several attempts. The translator struggled with the unfamiliar sounds, spitting out broken fragments of words that made little sense at first. But slowly, piece by piece, something began to form. "Who are you?" the translator's flat computer voice repeated, matching the pattern of the alien's speech as best it could. Elena stepped forward, though there was no way for the being to see her directly. Still, she spoke clearly, knowing the probe speakers could carry her voice back through the same channel. "We are explorers," she said slowly, "from the planet you might call Earth, nearby. We found your ships, and we mean you no harm. We want to help, if we can." There was a long pause after the translator finished converting her words into a series of clicks and tones. The being tilted its head, studying the probe as if trying to understand something far bigger than simple words. Then it responded, and this time the translator worked more smoothly, having learned a little more from the exchange. "You are the small ones," the alien said, its translated voice slow and careful. "The stories spoke of you, a young species, near a yellow star." "You know about us?" Elena asked, surprised. "We watched, long ago, before the sleep. Before the enemy came." The being paused, and something in its tone, even filtered through a machine translator, carried deep exhaustion and old pain. "How long has it been?" Elena looked at Dana, unsure how to answer such a question. "We don't know exactly. Your ships have been drifting near our planet Mars for what looks like hundreds of years, based on the ice and wear on your hulls." The alien was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried something that sounded almost like grief. "Hundreds of years. Then we are truly the last." "The last of what?" Elena asked gently. "The last of the Ashvari fleet," the being said. "My name, in your sounds, would be close to Kalen. I was the ship's keeper, meant to watch over the others while they slept, and wake when danger passed, or when help arrived. It seems help has finally come, though far later than we hoped." Over the next several hours, Kalen shared pieces of his story, speaking slowly through the imperfect translator, teaching it new words along the way as the system adapted. The crew of the Meridian listened from the bridge, recording everything, piecing together a history far older and far darker than anything they had imagined. "The Ashvari," Kalen explained, "were once a great civilization, spread across many stars, with cities built on dozens of worlds and fleets that traveled between them freely. They had lived in peace for thousands of years, exploring, building, and growing, much like humanity hoped to do someday. Then the enemy came. Kalen called them the Nixari, though the word through the translator came out sounding cold and sharp, almost like a warning all on its own. The Nixari were not a single species, not in the way the Ashvari or humans understood it. They were closer to a single mind, spread across countless bodies, a swarm that consumed everything in its path, taking resources, technology, and living beings alike to fuel their endless expansion. They came to our worlds one by one, Kalen said. We fought for generations, but for every one of them we destroyed, 10 more came in its place. They do not fear death, they do not value a single life the way we do. They are simply hunger, spread across the stars. What happened to your homeworld? Elena asked quietly. There was a long silence before Kalen answered. Gone. Burned to nothing, along with every world we called home. This fleet, the one you found, is what remained of our people after the final battle. We fled as far as we could, searching for a place to hide, to rest, to gather strength again. We found this system, quiet and far from the war, and we built the sleeping chambers, hoping to wait until it was safe to rebuild. How many of you are left? Dana asked, though she already feared the answer. I do not know, Kalen admitted. Many pods have already failed, their power long spent, their occupants lost. I was meant to wake periodically, check on the fleet, and return to sleep if all remained safe. But something went wrong. My own systems failed as well, trapping me in sleep far longer than intended, until your machine's light woke something inside my pod that should have already died out long ago. Elena felt a heavy weight settle over her heart. This was not a story of conquest or invasion. This was a story of survivors, the last remains of a once great people, clinging to life by the thinnest thread possible. We want to help you, she said firmly. Whatever pods are still active, whatever crew members might still be alive, we'll do everything we can to help you recover. Kalen was quiet for a long moment. That is a kind offer, but I must warn you, small one. Waking our fleet fully, restoring power to all our systems, will require a great deal of energy. Energy that will send out signals, signatures that can be detected across great distances. Signatures that the Nixari might detect, Elena said, understanding immediately. Yes, Kalen said simply. If you help us wake fully, you may be drawing the attention of the very enemy that destroyed our homeworld, toward your own. The bridge went silent as the full weight of Kalen's warning settled over the crew. Elena looked out at the massive fleet floating near Mars, ancient ships filled with sleeping survivors, and thought about the safety of Earth, only a short distance away in the vastness of space. Captain, we need to inform command about this immediately, Dana said. This isn't just a discovery anymore. This could be a threat to the entire solar system. I know, Elena said. She turned back toward the probe's camera feed, looking at Kalen's tired, ancient eyes, staring back through the lens. Kalen, I need you to understand something. My people will need time to decide how to respond to what you've told us. But I promise you, we will not simply leave you and your people to die out here, forgotten and alone. Your kindness may cost your people dearly, Kalen warned. Maybe, Elena admitted, but turning our backs on someone in need would cost us something too, something I'm not willing to lose. Kalen studied the probe for a long moment, as if trying to read truth in a machine that could not show emotion. Then he nodded slowly, a small gesture, but one that felt heavy with meaning. Then perhaps there is still hope for the stars, after all. Elena ordered a full report sent back to Earth immediately, detailing everything they had learned. She knew the message would cause chaos among Earth's leaders, arguments about safety, about risk, about whether helping a dying alien civilization was worth the danger it might bring. She also knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out among the stars, an ancient enemy that had already destroyed one great civilization might soon turn its endless hunger toward a new target, and whether humanity was ready or not, the choices made in the coming days would decide the fate of far more than just one ship, or one captain, or one small fleet of sleeping survivors near Mars. Back on Earth, in the tall glass towers of Earth Defense Command, the message from the Meridian arrived just as the sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean. Admiral Trevor Hale read the report twice, his face growing paler with each line. He immediately called for an emergency meeting with the Council, knowing that whatever decision they made, in the coming hours, would shape the future of humanity for generations to come. Not everyone in that meeting would agree on what should be done. And far above them, near the quiet red world of Mars, Captain Elena Reyes waited for their answer, knowing that no matter what Earth decided, she had already made her own choice in her heart. She would not abandon Kalen and his people. Not now. Not after hearing their story. The question was whether the rest of humanity would stand beside her, or whether she would be forced to stand alone. While the council debated on Earth, Elena continued her work aboard the Meridian, determined to learn as much as she could before any final decisions were handed down. Kalen, weak but steady, agreed to move to a small chamber near the airlock, connecting his ship to the Meridian, allowing for more direct conversation, once engineers confirmed the atmosphere and pressure could be safely matched between the two vessels. The first time Kalen stepped, however carefully, into a room built by human hands, the moment felt heavier than anyone expected. Dressed in a simple insulated suit provided by the ship's medical team, he moved slowly through the airlock, his long frame ducking slightly to avoid the low ceiling designed for human proportions. Elena stood waiting on the other side, flanked by Dana and Priya, all three of them trying not to stare too openly, though the temptation was difficult to resist. Up close, Kalen's gray skin had a faint shimmer to it, like stone catching morning light, and his eyes, large and dark, studied the room with obvious intelligence. "Your ship is smaller than I expected," Kalen said through the translator, which Dana had modified slightly to fit into a compact device worn around his neck. "But it feels warm, alive. My own ship has been cold and silent for so long. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to stand somewhere with a living crew around me." "You're welcome here, Kalen," Elena said, "for as long as you need." Over the next several days, Kalen shared more details about Ashvari history and culture, painting a picture of a civilization that had once valued art, music, and philosophy as much as science and exploration. He described great floating cities built above gas giants, vast libraries containing knowledge gathered from 100 different worlds, and festivals celebrating the changing of seasons on planets so far away their names meant nothing to human ears. "We were not always a people of war," he explained one evening, as Priya carefully recorded his words for the ship's growing archive of Ashvari history. "For thousands of years, we knew only peace. It was the coming of the Nixari that changed everything. War does strange things to a people, Captain Reyes. It forces you to become something you never wished to be, simply to survive another day." "How did the war start?" Priya asked gently. Kalen's expression, as much as the crew could read it, grew distant and pained. "No one truly knows how it began. One day, scouts from a border colony reported strange ships entering our space, ships that did not respond to any attempt at communication. Within a single season, that colony was gone, not destroyed exactly, but consumed. Its people, its resources, even its very atmosphere and soil, stripped away and taken, leaving nothing behind but an empty, lifeless rock." The crew listened in stunned silence as Kalen continued, describing decade after decade of desperate fighting, entire fleets built and lost within a single generation, worlds evacuated in chaos, as the Nixari swarm continued its relentless advance across Ashvari space. "We built greater and greater weapons," Kalen said. "We formed alliances with other species we encountered along our borders, some of whom joined us willingly, others who we were forced to convince through less gentle means, though I am not proud of those choices. Still, nothing we built was ever quite enough. For every victory, the Nixari seemed to learn and adapt faster than we could counter." "And your homeworld?" Elena asked quietly, already suspecting the answer, but needing to hear it spoken aloud. "Falled during what we called the Long Retreat," Kalen said, his translated voice carrying a weight that machines were never meant to convey, and yet somehow did. "I was among the last fleet to leave orbit before the final assault began. I still remember watching my home from the viewport of my ship, watching the lights of our greatest cities slowly go dark, one by one, as the Nixari swarm descended upon them. No one on the bridge spoke for a long moment after that. Even Marcus, usually quick with a question or comment, simply sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what Kalen had witnessed and survived. "I'm sorry," Elena finally said, the words feeling small and insufficient against such a story, but necessary all the same. "I can't imagine what that must have been like." "No," Kalen agreed softly. I hope you never have to. It was during these long conversations that Elena began to understand the true scale of the decision facing humanity. This was not simply a question of studying interesting alien technology or making first contact with a curious new species. This was a question of whether humanity was willing to stand beside a broken, grieving people against an enemy capable of erasing entire civilizations from existence. She thought carefully about how to present this to Earth's leadership, knowing that fear alone would likely dominate the conversation unless she found a way to help them understand what she now understood herself, sitting across from a survivor whose entire world had been taken from him. When Admiral Hale's reply finally arrived, authorizing additional support ships and a specialized response team, Elena allowed herself a small measure of relief, though she knew the true difficulty was only just beginning. Earth's fleet would arrive soon, bringing with it new voices, new opinions, and new pressures that would test everything she and Kalen had begun building together in these first fragile days of contact. She returned to the observation deck that night, watching the ancient fleet drift silently alongside her own ship, and wondered how many more survivors like Kalen and Sierra still remained trapped in failing pods throughout the fleet, waiting for a chance at rescue that might never come if humanity chose caution over compassion. Whatever happened next, she promised herself quietly, she would not let that chance slip away without a fight. The emergency meeting at Earth Defense Command lasted through the night. Admiral Trevor Hale sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by generals, scientists, and political leaders from every major nation on Earth. The report from the Meridian sat on every screen in the room, and the mood was tense enough to cut with a knife. This is exactly the kind of risk we cannot afford, said Councilwoman Iris Bellwether, a sharp-eyed woman who represented the unified Earth Senate. An alien species that fought a war against an enemy, powerful enough to destroy them completely. And we're talking about waking that enemy up and pointing it toward our own front door. With respect, Councilwoman, the enemy isn't sleeping. It's already out there, somewhere, said General Marcus Okafor, head of Earth's fleet operations. The only question is whether it already knows where these Ashvari ships are hiding, or whether we can still keep this quiet. And if it does know, Bellwether shot back, if we wake this fleet fully, and this Nixari swarm finds them, they'll find us too. We'd be dragging humanity into someone else's war, a war we know nothing about, against an enemy we've never even seen. Admiral Hale raised a hand for quiet. Captain Reyes believes the Ashvari can be valuable allies, not just a burden. Their technology alone could be centuries ahead of our own. Their knowledge of this Nixari threat could give us critical warning if it ever does turn toward our system. Or it could get us destroyed before we're ready for any of it, Bellwether said coldly. The argument continued for hours, each side presenting its case. Some wanted to quietly leave the Ashvari fleet alone, cut off all contact, and hope the Nixari never came looking. Others wanted to secretly study the alien technology, while keeping the survivors sedated and controlled, treating them as a resource rather than as people. A smaller group, led by Admiral Hale himself, argued for open cooperation, treating Kalen and his people as guests and potential allies. In the end, the Council reached a compromise that pleased no one completely. Earth Defense Command would send a larger support team to the Meridian's location, along with additional warships to secure the area. Captain Reyes would be allowed to continue working with the Ashvari survivors, but under close watch, with orders to prioritize Earth's safety above all else. If the situation became too dangerous, Earth's forces would be authorized to withdraw immediately, taking whatever useful technology they could, and leaving the rest behind. Colonel Damian Voss was chosen to lead the support team, a decision that troubled Admiral Hale more than he let on. Voss was known throughout the fleet as a skilled officer, but also a hard one, someone who valued results over sentiment, and who had little patience for what he considered unnecessary risks. 3 days later, a small fleet of Earth warships arrived near Mars, joining the Meridian at the edge of the ancient Ashvari formation. Colonel Voss's flagship, the heavily armed cruiser Sentinel, took position at the front, its weapons systems active and ready. Captain Reyes, Voss said, his voice cold and formal, as he addressed her through the ship's comm system for the first time. I've read your reports. Quite the discovery you've made. Colonel Voss, Elena replied evenly. I hope you understand, the situation requires careful handling. These are survivors, not prisoners. and not simply a resource to be harvested. I understand the situation requires results, Voss said. Earth's safety comes first. Everything else is secondary. I trust we're in agreement on that much at least. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice steady. We're in agreement that Earth's safety matters. We disagree, it seems, on how best to protect it. The tension between the two officers only grew over the following days. While Elena worked closely with Kalen, slowly building trust and understanding between their two peoples, Voss pushed hard for aggressive action, insisting on placing armed guards throughout the Ashvari ships and demanding immediate access to their technology for study. They're already dying, Voss argued during one tense meeting aboard the Meridian. Half their pods have already failed. We're not hurting anyone by taking what's useful before it's lost forever. You're talking about looting a graveyard while some of the people in it are still breathing, Elena snapped back, her patience finally breaking. Kalen and the other survivors we've managed to wake are not artifacts, Colonel. They're refugees, the last of their entire people. Sentiment doesn't win wars, Captain, Voss said coldly. And if the enemy that destroyed them ever turns its attention toward us, sentiment won't save a single life on Earth. Despite the friction, work continued. With careful cooperation between human engineers and the awakened Ashvari, more pods were slowly brought back online. Kalen worked tirelessly, guiding Dana and her engineering team through the delicate process of repairing ancient systems that had been failing for decades. Each successful revival brought a small spark of hope. Another survivor pulled back from the edge of death. One of the first to wake after Kalen was a young Ashvari named Sira, who had served as a systems engineer on the fleet before the long sleep began. Sira's pod had been damaged in whatever battle had brought the fleet here in the first place, and reviving her required careful repairs, using a mix of Ashvari knowledge and human technology. When Sira finally woke, weak and disoriented, she wept upon learning how many years had passed, and how many of her people had been lost during the long, silent drift through space. Elena sat with her for hours, offering what comfort she could, even though words felt impossibly small against such enormous loss. You did not have to do this, Sira said quietly, once she had recovered enough to speak clearly through the translator. Your people owe us nothing. We are strangers from a story you never asked to be part of. Maybe, Elena said, but somewhere out there, my own people might one day need help from strangers too. I'd like to think someone would answer that call, the same way we're answering yours. Slowly, more survivors were revived. Each one carried pieces of their people's long, tragic history, stories of battles fought and lost, of cities burned, of families torn apart by an enemy that showed no mercy and took no prisoners. The crew of the Meridian listened to each story, and with every one, their resolve to help only grew stronger. But not everyone shared that resolve. Colonel Voss grew increasingly frustrated with the slow pace of technology sharing, believing the Ashvari were holding back their most valuable secrets. He began pushing for more direct methods, including demanding that certain systems be forcibly removed from the ships for study, regardless of the risk to the fragile survivors still recovering nearby. This is exactly the kind of behavior that could break the trust we've worked so hard to build, Elena warned him during a tense confrontation on the Sentinel's bridge. If you push too hard, you'll destroy any chance of real cooperation. I don't need their trust, Captain. I need their technology, Voss replied. Earth is depending on us to bring back something useful from this situation, not just a handful of new friends and a mountain of sad stories. It was during one of these disputes that new information arrived, information that changed everything. Marcus burst into the command meeting, his face pale, a tablet clutched tightly in his hand. Captain, Colonel, you both need to see this. Long-range sensors just picked up something. He pulled up the data on the main screen. A faint but unmistakable energy trail stretched across the edge of the system, moving steadily inward. What is that? Voss asked sharply. I compared it to the readings Kalen gave us about Nixari ship signatures, Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. It's a match. Not a perfect one. The readings are old and degraded, but close enough that I don't think it's a coincidence. The room went cold and silent. How long until it reaches us? Elena asked immediately. Marcus checked his calculations again, hoping he was wrong, but the numbers refused to change. At its current speed, approximately 9 days. 9 days, Voss repeated. his earlier confidence cracking slightly, for the first time since his arrival. "Are we certain this is the enemy fleet Kalen described?" "I'll confirm with Kalen immediately," Elena said, already moving toward the door. She found Kalen in what had become a makeshift meeting room aboard the largest revived HFY ship, working alongside Dana on repairing another failing power system. When Elena explained what Marcus had detected, Kalen's already tired expression grew even more troubled. "It matches the patterns of a Nexari scout formation," he confirmed, studying the data carefully. "Smaller than a full invasion fleet, but more than capable of destroying what remains of my people, and likely your ships as well, if it reaches us before we are ready." "Ready for what exactly?" Elena asked. "What can we even do against something that destroyed your entire civilization?" Kalen was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. A full Nexari invasion force would be nearly impossible to stop. But a scout formation, sent ahead to investigate a possible energy signature, can sometimes be turned away, if enough force and cunning is used together. It will not be easy, but it is not entirely without hope. "How much time do we have to prepare?" Dana asked. 9 days if your officer's calculations are correct, Kalen said. "It is not much time, but it may be enough, if our two peoples work together fully, without hesitation, and without division." The weight of his words settled heavily over the room. Elena thought immediately of Colonel Voss, of the tension and distrust that had grown between them since his arrival, and wondered if unity between the humans themselves would prove just as difficult as unity between two entirely different species. She returned to the Sentinel to deliver the news personally, finding Voss already reviewing the sensor data with a grim expression. 9 days, he said, before she could even speak. 9 days, until we find out whether this entire situation was worth the risk. "It's not about whether it was worth the risk anymore, Colonel," Elena said firmly. "It's about what we do next. Kalen believes a scout fleet like this can be turned away if we work together, human forces and Ashvari survivors combined. That means we need full cooperation, starting right now, not more arguments about who controls what technology." Voss studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his usually guarded eyes. "And if you're wrong? If this so-called cooperation isn't enough, and that fleet reaches Earth itself? Then at least we'll have tried to stop it here, as far from home as possible, instead of waiting to fight it in our own backyard, with even less warning than we have now," Elena replied. For the first time since his arrival, Colonel Voss did not immediately argue. He looked out the viewport toward the distant stars, toward the direction where an ancient and terrible enemy was slowly making its way closer, drawn by a spark of hope that had been ignited near a quiet red planet. 9 days, he said again, quieter this time. "Let's not waste a single hour of it, Captain." Word spread quickly through both fleets, human and Ashvari alike. The revived survivors, weak and grieving as they were, began working alongside Earth's engineers and soldiers with a shared sense of urgent purpose. Old wounds and new distrust were set aside, at least for now, as everyone turned their full attention toward the coming storm. Elena stood on the bridge of the Meridian that night, watching the ancient Ashvari fleet and the newly arrived Earth ships positioned together against the vast darkness of space. Somewhere out there, a Nexari scout formation was drawing closer with every passing hour, carrying with it the possibility of destruction on a scale humanity had never faced before. But for the first time since this entire journey began, Elena also felt something else alongside the fear. A fragile, stubborn kind of hope, born from an unlikely alliance between two very different peoples, both determined to prove that even in the face of an enemy that valued nothing but conquest, there were still things in this universe worth fighting for together. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back now. Back on Earth, news of the approaching Nexari scout fleet caused a wave of panic through the highest levels of government, even as the general public remained mostly unaware of just how close danger had come to their own solar system. Admiral Hale found himself defending Elena's decision to continue cooperation with the Ashvari survivors against a growing chorus of voices demanding immediate withdrawal. "We cannot simply abandon 9 days of careful alliance building the moment things become difficult," Hale argued before the council, his voice firm despite the exhaustion evident on his face. "Captain Reyes and Colonel Voss both agree that our best chance of surviving this scout fleet lies in continued cooperation, not retreat. And if they're wrong, Councilwoman Bellwether pressed. If this scout fleet is simply the first wave of a much larger invasion force, we will have thrown away irreplaceable ships and soldiers, defending an alien civilization that was already dying before we ever found them. With respect, Councilwoman, if we abandon them now, and the Nixari do eventually turn their attention toward Earth, we will have thrown away something else entirely, Hale replied. Our only chance of facing that enemy, with allies who actually understand how to fight it. The debate raged for hours before the Council finally agreed, reluctantly, to support the joint defense effort, though several members made it clear they expected a full accounting of the outcome, regardless of how the battle unfolded. Meanwhile, near Mars, preparations continued at a punishing pace. Elena found herself constantly moving between meetings, inspections, and quiet moments of reassurance with crew members who were beginning to feel the strain of constant work and mounting fear. One such moment came when she found young Ensign Priya sitting alone in the observation lounge late one night, staring out at the stars with an expression of quiet worry. "Trouble sleeping?" Elena asked, taking a seat beside her. "I keep thinking about what Kalen told us," Priya admitted. "About watching his homeworld go dark. I keep imagining what that would feel like, watching Earth from up here, knowing there was nothing we could do to stop it." Elena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "That's exactly why we're doing this, Priya. Not just to help Kalen's people, though that matters too. We're doing this so that if the day ever comes when Earth faces a threat like the Nixari, we won't be facing it completely alone and unprepared. Do you really think we can win this fight? Against something that destroyed an entire civilization? I think we have a better chance fighting together than any of us would have fighting alone," Elena said honestly. "And I think Kalen and his people deserve the chance to prove that this enemy can be beaten, even if it's only a small victory against a scout fleet, rather than the whole invasion force." Priya nodded slowly, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "Thank you, Captain. I needed to hear that." "We all need reminders sometimes," Elena said with a tired smile. "Even me." The following day brought a difficult breakthrough. While studying damaged sections of one of the larger HFY warships, Dana and her engineering team, working alongside a small group of newly revived HFY technicians, discovered a partially intact weapon system, unlike anything either species had previously encountered, a device capable of generating short bursts of concentrated energy, far more powerful than anything in Earth's current arsenal. "If we can get this fully operational before the Nixari arrive, it could make a real difference in the fight," Dana reported excitedly during the evening briefing. "How much time will it take to repair?" Elena asked. "Working around the clock. Maybe 2 days," Dana said. "It's cutting it close, but I think it's possible." "Do it," Elena said without hesitation. "Whatever resources you need, human or HFY, take them. This could be the edge we need." Kalen, upon hearing the news, seemed genuinely surprised. That weapon system was considered lost decades before our final defeat. "I did not realize any functioning components had survived the journey here. Sounds like your ship still had a few secrets left to share," Elena said. "It would seem so," Kalen agreed, something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossing his weathered features. "Perhaps this old fleet has more fight left in it than either of us realized, Captain." As the days ticked down toward the scout fleet's arrival, small moments of unexpected hope like this one helped keep spirits from breaking entirely under the weight of what was coming. Human and HFY crews continued to find ways to work together despite language barriers and cultural differences, discovering along the way that shared purpose could bridge gaps that might otherwise have seemed impossible to cross. Colonel Voss, despite his earlier resistance, found himself increasingly impressed by the resourcefulness and resilience of the HFY survivors he worked alongside. During one late-night inspection of the fleet's growing defenses, he found himself standing beside Torix, watching a group of human and HFY engineers work together to calibrate a newly repaired shield generator. "They fight well, for a young species," Torix commented, watching the human engineers work with obvious respect in his voice. "They've had good teachers this week," Voss replied, echoing words he had heard Jake use earlier, though he said them with far less reluctance than he might have a week earlier. "Perhaps we have taught each other something these past days," Torix said. "My people came here believing all hope was lost. I did not expect to find a reason to believe otherwise, waiting quietly near a small red planet." Voss said nothing for a long moment, simply watching the combined work continue beneath the harsh work lights illuminating the ship's damaged hull. "Let's hope that hope is enough when the fighting actually starts," he finally said. "It will have to be," Torix replied simply. "It is all we have left to offer." As the 9th day finally arrived, bringing with it confirmation that the Nixari scout fleet was now less than a day away from reaching the combined human and Ashvari defenses, a strange calm settled over both fleets. There was no more time for doubt or hesitation now. Only time to trust in the preparations made, the alliances built, and the choice that Elena Reyes would soon be forced to make, one that would determine not only the fate of the last Ashvari survivors, but perhaps the future of humanity's place among the stars as well. The next 9 days passed in a blur of work, sweat, and quiet fear. Every ship in the combined fleet, human and Ashvari alike, buzzed with activity around the clock. There was no time to rest, and barely any time to sleep. Every hour mattered now. Kaylin worked closely with Dana and her engineering teams, teaching them how to reinforce the ancient Ashvari hull plating, using materials salvaged from damaged sections of the fleet. In return, Earth's engineers shared their knowledge of modern shield technology. Technology that, while far less advanced than the original Ashvari systems, still offered ways to boost the fleet's remaining defenses. "Your shield generators use a completely different principle than ours," Dana said one afternoon, studying a schematic Kaylin had shared with her. "But I think if we combine the two systems, we might actually create something stronger than either one alone." "That is the strange gift of working with a new mind," Kaylin replied. "Sometimes two different ways of solving the same problem create a solution neither one could have found alone." Meanwhile, Colonel Voss, despite his earlier doubts, threw himself fully into the preparations. Whatever his personal feelings about the situation, he was still a skilled military commander, and he began organizing joint training exercises between human pilots and the small number of Ashvari survivors capable of piloting their remaining smaller ships. "Their ships move differently than ours," said Lieutenant Commander Jake Ferris, one of Earth's top pilots, after his first joint exercise with an Ashvari pilot named Torix. "Faster in some ways, slower in others, but once you understand the pattern, you can predict what they'll do next. That's going to be important if we're flying alongside them in a real fight." Torix, for his part, seemed almost amused by how quickly the human pilots adapted. "Your people learn fast," he told Jake through the improving translator systems, which grew more accurate with every day of use. "Faster than I expected from such a young species." "We've had good teachers this week," Jake replied with a tired grin. "Not everything went smoothly, of course. Some human soldiers remained deeply uneasy around the alien survivors, unable to shake old fears of the unknown, despite everything they had witnessed. Some Ashvari, in turn, struggled to trust beings who had only just discovered space travel, worried that their new allies lacked the experience needed to survive what was coming. Elena spent much of her time moving between ships, checking on preparations, settling disputes, and doing her best to keep morale from crumbling under the weight of the coming threat. She barely slept during those 9 days, running on nothing but coffee, determination, and the growing bond she had formed with Kaylin and the other survivors. "You carry a heavy burden, Captain," Kaylin told her one evening, as they stood together in the observation deck of his ship, watching Earth's warships drift alongside the ancient Ashvari vessels. "Leading two very different peoples through such uncertain times cannot be easy." "It's not," Elena admitted, "but it's worth it. I keep thinking about what would have happened if we just reported your fleet to command and walked away, left you all to die out here without ever knowing your story." "Many would say that would have been the safer choice," Kaylin said quietly. "Maybe," Elena said, "but safe isn't always right. I couldn't have lived with myself, knowing we found survivors, and simply turned our backs on them because helping seemed too risky." Kaylin studied her for a long moment, his ancient eyes carrying something that looked almost like respect. "Your people are fortunate to have a leader who thinks this way, Captain Reyes. I only hope it is enough to help us survive what is coming." On the 6th day, disaster nearly struck. A group of human soldiers, growing increasingly nervous about working so closely with unfamiliar technology, discovered a section of one Ashvari ship containing what looked like weapon systems, still partially active. Without waiting for proper authorization, they attempted to access the system directly, hoping to understand it quickly before the coming battle. The result was a small explosion that injured 3 soldiers and damaged an important section of the ship's power grid, a section that had taken days to carefully repair. Colonel Voss was furious, but so was Elena, though for different reasons. "This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior that could destroy everything we've built here," she said sharply, during the emergency meeting called afterward. "We are guests in their home right now, Colonel, whether your soldiers understand that or not." "My soldiers were trying to prepare for battle, Captain, not cause harm," Voss shot back, though his voice lacked its usual sharp confidence. "Then they need better training on cooperation, not just combat," Elena said firmly. "We don't have time to fix mistakes born from impatience. Every hour we lose now is an hour we can't get back before that fleet arrives." Kalen, surprisingly, chose to speak up in defense of the soldiers, despite the damage caused. "Fear makes all of us act carelessly sometimes, Captain. Your soldiers are not so different from my own people in that regard. We should focus on fixing what was broken, not on placing blame that will not help us survive the coming days." His words helped calm the tension, at least for the moment, and repair crews worked around the clock to fix the damaged systems before time ran out completely. By the 8th day, preparations were as complete as they could be, given the limited time available. The combined fleet had grown stronger, though still nowhere near powerful enough to face a full Nixari invasion force. But against a smaller scout formation, as Kalen had described, there was at least a fighting chance. That evening, Admiral Hale contacted Elena directly from Earth, his face grim on the view screen. "Captain Reyes, the Council has been closely monitoring the situation," he said. "Given the risk involved, some members are pushing for a full withdrawal, taking whatever technology and survivors we can safely transport, and abandoning the rest of the Ashvari fleet before the enemy arrives." Elena felt her stomach twist. "Admiral, with respect, that would mean leaving behind dozens of survivors still trapped in failing pods, unable to be moved safely in the time we have left." "I'm aware of that, Captain," Hale said heavily. "The Council is weighing the survival of those individuals against the potential risk to every ship and soldier currently stationed near Mars, and by extension, to Earth itself." "And what do you think, Admiral?" Elena asked directly. Hale was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I think you are the one standing there, Captain. Closest to this situation, closest to these people. The final decision on how to proceed rests with you. Whatever you choose, know that the Council will support it, but they need your answer soon. The scout fleet's estimated arrival is now less than 24 hours away." The weight of that responsibility settled onto Elena's shoulders like a physical thing. She thought about every survivor she had met over the past week, about Kalen's quiet strength, about Sira's grief and gratitude, about the dozens of names and faces belonging to a people who had already lost everything once before. She thought about withdrawing, about the safety such a choice would offer to Earth's ships and soldiers. And she thought about what kind of message that withdrawal would send, not just to the dying Ashvari survivors left behind, but to humanity itself, about what kind of people they truly wanted to be as they took their first real steps into the wider universe. She called a final meeting that night, gathering Colonel Voss, Dana, Marcus, Kalen, and Sira together in the Meridian's main briefing room. "The Council has left the final decision to me," she said, looking around at each of them in turn. "We can withdraw now, saving our own ships and personnel, and leave the remaining Ashvari survivors to face the scout fleet alone. Or we can stand together, fight together, and hope that combined, we're strong enough to turn this enemy away before it's too late." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Colonel Voss spoke, his voice carrying none of its earlier coldness. "Captain, for what it's worth, my soldiers have spent the last week fighting and working alongside these people. I've watched men and women who once feared the unknown risk their own lives repairing alien ships, teaching alien pilots, standing guard over alien survivors they'd never even met a week ago. I don't think they'd forgive themselves, or me, if we simply turned our backs now." Elena looked at him, surprised by the shift in his tone, but grateful for it nonetheless. "I agree with the Colonel," Dana added. "We've come too far to walk away now." Marcus nodded firmly in agreement, and Sira, though her voice was quiet, spoke with clear determination. "Whatever you decide, Captain, know that my people are prepared to fight beside you, not simply hide behind your ships. We do not wish to be saved without earning that survival through our own effort." Kalen said nothing for a long moment, simply studying Elena's face carefully. "You already know your answer, Captain Reyes. I can see it in your eyes. You have known it since the moment you chose to send that probe through the crack in my ship's hull. All those days ago." Elena took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the decision settle firmly into place within her heart. "We stand and fight," she said finally, her voice steady and clear. "All of us, together. We're not abandoning anyone, not while there's still a chance to save them." The room seemed to release a breath it had been holding collectively, and for the first time in days, something like determined hope replaced the fear that had hung over every conversation. "Then let's make sure that choice is one we can actually win," Voss said, already turning toward the tactical displays to begin final preparations. "Kalen, I want everything you can tell us about how the Nixari fight. Every weakness, every pattern, anything at all that might give us an edge." Kalen nodded gravely. "I will share everything I remember. It is the least I can offer, in exchange for the choice your captain has made on behalf of my people." Through the remaining hours of that final night, the combined fleet worked with a renewed sense of purpose, driven not just by fear of the coming enemy, but by a shared determination born from Elena's choice. Human soldiers and Ashvari survivors worked side by side, without hesitation now. Weapon systems were calibrated, defensive formations were rehearsed, and every ship, no matter how small, took its place in the plan that would decide their fate. Elena stood alone on the Meridian's bridge, in the final quiet hour before dawn, looking out at the combined fleet spread before her, human warships and ancient alien vessels standing together against the coming dark. Somewhere out there, drawing ever closer, the Nixari scout fleet carried with it echoes of a war that had already destroyed one great civilization. Whether her choice would save both their peoples, or simply ensure they fell together, remained to be seen. But as the first light of the distant sun began to touch the edges of Mars in the distance, Elena felt a strange, quiet certainty settle over her heart. Whatever happened next, she had chosen to stand for something greater than simple safety, and deep down, she believed that choice, more than any weapon or shield they had built together, might just be the thing that carried them through to the other side of this fight. The final countdown had begun. There was no more time left to prepare, only time left to fight. Before the final hours arrived, Elena made one last visit to Kalen's ship, wanting to speak with him privately before everything that had been building over the past 9 days came to a head. She found him in the quiet chamber that had once held the pods of his fallen crewmates, standing before the rows of dark, silent chambers with his head bowed low. "I come here sometimes," he admitted, without turning around as she entered, "to remember them. To make sure I do not forget how many were lost before your people ever arrived." "Do you regret waking up?" Elena asked quietly, coming to stand beside him, knowing everything that's happened since, everything that's still coming. Kalen considered the question carefully before answering. "No, Captain. Even with the danger now bearing down upon us, I do not regret it. For the first time since the long retreat began, my people have something we lost long ago. Hope, built not on desperate survival alone, but on genuine partnership with another people, who chose to stand beside us freely, without being forced to do so." "That partnership almost didn't happen," Elena reminded him. "There were many voices back on Earth pushing hard for a very different outcome. And yet here we stand," Kalen said, finally turning to face her. "Because you refuse to let fear alone decide the outcome. That is a rare quality, Captain Reyes, in any species I have encountered across the stars. I hope, whatever happens in the battle ahead, that your people come to understand just how remarkable a leader they have in you." Elena felt an unexpected warmth at his words, though she quickly pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the practical matters still needing attention before the battle began. "We should go over the final battle plan one more time. I want to make sure every ship, human and Ashvari alike, understands exactly what's expected of them." "Of course," Kalen agreed, falling into step beside her as they made their way toward the ship's command center. "Though I suspect, Captain, that no amount of planning can fully prepare either of our peoples for what is about to happen. Sometimes, in the end, all any of us can do is trust in each other and fight with everything we have left." The final briefing that evening brought together commanders from every vessel in the combined fleet, human and Ashvari alike, crowded into the largest available meeting space aboard Kalen's ship. Elena stood at the front of the room, a detailed tactical display floating in the air before her, showing the carefully planned defensive formation both fleets would use once the Nixari scout fleet arrived. "Every ship has a role in this plan," she said, addressing the assembled officers and pilots. "No one fights alone. No one retreats alone. We move as a single fleet, or we do not move at all. Is that understood?" A chorus of confirmations, in both human voices and the strange clicking tones of Ashvari speech, filled the room. "Kalen has shared everything he knows about Nixari attack patterns," Elena continued. "Their ships favor overwhelming numbers and brute force over subtlety or coordination. We will use that against them, drawing their formations into positions where our combined firepower can strike from multiple angles at once." Colonel Voss stepped forward to outline the specific tactical maneuvers each squadron would follow, his earlier hostility toward the Ashvari long since replaced by focused determination to see the plan through to victory. Torix, standing beside him, added details about how Ashvari pilots could best support human fighter squadrons during the coming engagement, drawing on generations of hard-won experience fighting against this same terrible enemy. By the time the briefing ended, every commander in the room understood their role completely. There would be no confusion, no hesitation, when the moment of battle finally arrived. Whatever fear remained in the hearts of those gathered there, it was tempered now by careful preparation and a shared determination to see this fight through together. As the meeting broke up and officers returned to their respective ships to prepare their crews for what was coming, Elena found herself standing once more with Kalen, near the ship's main viewport, watching the distant stars where, somewhere out in the darkness, an ancient enemy continued its relentless approach. "Thank you, Captain," Kalen said quietly, "for everything you have done these past 9 days. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that my people will never forget the choice you made for us." "We're not finished yet," Elena replied, though she allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Let's win this fight first, and then we can talk about thanks." "Fair enough," Kalen agreed, something that might have been amusement coloring his translated voice. "Rest if you can, Captain. Tomorrow will demand everything we both have left to give." Elena returned to the Meridian in the final hours before dawn, walking slowly through corridors filled with crew members making their own final preparations, checking equipment, writing brief messages home in case the worst should happen, finding quiet moments of comfort with friends and colleagues before the battle began. She stopped by each station, offering words of encouragement, reminding her crew of everything they had accomplished together over the past frantic week. "We didn't come this far to fail now," she told them, gathering as many crew members as she could in the main hangar bay for one final address before the battle. 9 days ago, most of us had never even imagined standing shoulder to shoulder with another species, let alone fighting alongside them against an enemy capable of destroying entire worlds. And yet here we are, ready to do exactly that, because it was the right thing to do, and because we believed we could make a difference. She looked around at the tired, determined faces surrounding her, human and Ashvari alike, all gathered together in this moment of quiet before the coming storm. "Whatever happens next, know that you should be proud of what we've built here together these past 9 days. No matter the outcome, we chose compassion over fear, courage over caution. That choice already means something, regardless of how tomorrow's battle unfolds." A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the gathered crew, followed by a growing sense of shared resolve that Elena could feel radiating through the room like warmth from a fire. Whatever fear remained among them, it was matched now by genuine determination, forged through 9 days of shared struggle and hard-won trust between two very different peoples. As the crew dispersed to their final stations, Elena made her way back to the bridge, taking her place at the center of the room, just as the first confirmed sensor readings of the approaching Nixari fleet began appearing on the main display. The countdown that had begun 9 days earlier was finally reaching its end. There was no more time left to prepare, only time left to fight, together, as allies, exactly as Elena had chosen when Earth's leadership had left the final decision in her hands. Nixari's scout fleet arrived exactly when the calculations predicted, sliding into the edge of the solar system like a shadow crossing the stars. Marcus's sensors picked up the formation long before it came into visual range, a cluster of dark, jagged shapes moving with cold, mechanical precision. Contact confirmed. Marcus announced, his voice tight with tension. 7 vessels. Configuration matches what Kalen described. They're moving directly toward our position. On the bridge of the Meridian, Elena stood at the center of the room, watching the tactical display as the enemy formation grew closer with every passing minute. Around her, human ships and Ashvari vessels held their positions in a formation carefully planned over the past week, ready to defend the space near Mars with everything they had. All ships, report status, Elena said over the combined communication channel linking every vessel in the fleet, human and Ashvari alike. One by one, reports came in. Colonel Voss confirmed the Sentinel and its escort ships were ready. Torix confirmed the Ashvari pilots were in position, flying alongside human fighters in mixed formations, designed to combine the strengths of both people's technology. Kalen, aboard his own ship, confirmed the fleet's shared defense systems were fully powered, ready to activate the combined shielding they had spent the last week designing together. Remember the plan, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across every channel. We do not meet them head-on with brute force alone. We use their own patterns against them, just as Kalen taught us. Draw them into the crossfire zones. Let our combined formations do the work. Understood, Captain, Voss replied, standing by. The Nixari fleet closed the distance with terrifying speed, their dark ships cutting through space like blades. As they came into visual range, the crew of the Meridian got their first clear look at the enemy that had destroyed an entire civilization. The Nixari ships were unlike anything built by either humans or Ashvari. They seemed almost alive, their hulls covered in shifting patterns that pulsed with a faint reddish light, as if the ships themselves were breathing. There was nothing elegant about their design, only cold, brutal efficiency, built for a single purpose: destruction. They're not slowing down, Marcus reported. They're coming straight in, full speed. Let them, Elena said calmly. All ships, hold formation. Wait for my signal. The tension on the bridge stretched almost unbearably as the enemy fleet closed the final distance. Then, at the exact moment Kalen had predicted based on his knowledge of Nixari attack patterns, Elena gave the order. Now. All ships, execute defense pattern Kalen 1. The combined fleet sprang into action. Human warships peeled away from their static positions, moving in coordinated patterns that Kalen and his surviving pilots had helped design, drawing the Nixari vessels into carefully planned crossfire zones. At the same time, the Ashvari ships activated their shared shielding technology, a system built by combining human and Ashvari engineering, creating overlapping defensive fields that no single Nixari weapon could easily break through. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the darkness around Mars in brilliant flashes of light. The Nixari ships fired with terrible power, their weapons cutting through empty space where human and Ashvari ships had been only moments before, thanks to the carefully coordinated maneuvers both fleets had practiced together. Direct hit on Nixari Vessel 3, Marcus shouted, watching as one of the dark ships staggered under a combined barrage from 2 Ashvari fighters and a human cruiser working together in perfect coordination. Their shields are weaker than expected against combined fire patterns, Dana reported from her engineering station, monitoring the battle's progress closely. Kalen was right. They're built to fight overwhelming numbers with brute force, not coordinated tactics. The battle raged on, brutal and chaotic, but the combined fleet's careful preparation began to show its worth. Where individual ships might have been overwhelmed by the Nixari's raw power, the coordinated tactics developed over the past frantic week allowed human and Ashvari forces to fight as a single unified force, striking together and retreating together with practiced precision. Still, the battle was far from easy. A Nixari vessel broke through the crossfire pattern near the edge of the formation, its weapons tearing a deep gash across the hull of an Ashvari support ship. Sira's voice came through the comm channel, tight with pain but steady with determination. Hull breach on decks 4 through 6. We're venting atmosphere, but shields are holding on critical systems. We can still fight. Fall back to secondary position, Elena ordered immediately. Torix, cover her ship's retreat. Understood, Captain, Torix replied, his fighter already breaking formation to provide covering fire as Sira's damaged vessel pulled back toward the relative safety of the fleet's center. Elsewhere in the battle, Colonel Voss found himself in a fierce exchange with 2 Nixari vessels that had targeted the Sentinel directly, recognizing it as the largest and most heavily armed human ship in the formation. Their weapons are stronger than our simulations predicted. Voss shouted over the comm, as his ship shuddered under a direct hit. Shields at 60% and falling. Kalen, any suggestions? Elena asked urgently, watching the tactical display as the Sentinel took another hit. Their weapon systems require a brief recharge period between full-power strikes, Kalen replied quickly. If Colonel Voss can survive the next attack, there will be a small window where their defenses are weaker. Voss, you hear that? Elena relayed immediately. Copy that. Voss replied through gritted teeth, his voice strained but determined, preparing to exploit that window the moment it opens. The Sentinel weathered one more brutal exchange, its shields dropping dangerously low, but holding just long enough. The moment the Nixari ship's weapons flickered, showing the brief weakness Kalen had predicted, Voss gave the order to fire everything the Sentinel had left. The combined barrage tore through the weakened defenses of both Nixari vessels, destroying one outright and crippling the other so severely it began drifting uselessly through space, its weapons silent. Direct hit confirmed, Marcus shouted, a note of desperate hope creeping into his voice for the first time since the battle began. 2 enemy vessels down. The tide of the battle began, slowly and painfully, to turn, with 2 of the 7 Nixari ships destroyed, and combined tactics proving effective against the remaining vessels. The enemy formation began showing the first signs of hesitation, a hesitation that Kalen noted immediately. They are not accustomed to facing coordinated resistance like this, he said, studying the enemy fleet's shifting patterns closely. Their tactics rely on overwhelming force against scattered, disorganized defenders. We are not fighting the way they expect. Then let's give them more of what they don't expect, Elena said firmly. All ships, tighten formation and press the advantage. Kalen, guide us through their weak points. For the next several tense minutes, the combined fleet pressed its advantage, striking with coordinated precision against an enemy that had never before faced an alliance quite like this one. One by one, the remaining Nixari ships fell under the combined might of human weapons and Ashvari tactics, working together in ways neither species could have achieved alone. The final Nixari vessel, recognizing the battle was lost, attempted to flee, its remaining engines flaring desperately as it tried to escape back toward the edge of the system. Should we pursue? Marcus asked, watching the fleeing ship's trajectory. Elena considered for a moment, then shook her head. Let it go. If it survives to report what happened here, let the Nixari know exactly what kind of resistance they'll face, if they ever return. Sometimes the message matters more than the kill. As the last enemy vessel disappeared into the darkness beyond Mars, an exhausted silence settled over the combined fleet, quickly followed by an overwhelming wave of relief and disbelief among both human and Ashvari crews alike. We did it, Priya said softly, staring at the now empty tactical display, tears of relief filling her eyes. We actually did it. Elena allowed herself a moment to breathe, feeling the tension of the past 9 days finally begin to release from her shoulders. She opened a channel to Kalen's ship, her voice carrying quiet emotion despite her attempts to remain composed. Kalen, are you and your people all right? There was a brief pause before his voice came through, carrying something that sounded almost like disbelief, mixed with deep gratitude. We are alive, Captain Reyes. Thanks to the choice you made, and the courage of your people alongside mine, we are alive. In the days that followed, the full cost and consequence of the battle became clear. Several ships on both sides had suffered serious damage, and a small number of lives, both human and Ashvari, had been lost in the fighting. But the vast majority of the combined fleet had survived, and more importantly, the remaining Ashvari survivors, still recovering in their pods, had been protected long enough to eventually be revived safely, under far calmer circumstances. Admiral Hale personally traveled to the Meridian a week later, arriving to assess the situation and meet Kalen and the other Ashvari survivors directly. Standing on the observation deck, looking out at the scarred but victorious combined fleet, he turned to Elena with an expression of genuine respect. The Council is calling this the most significant moment in human history since we first reached the stars, he said. A choice that could have gone very differently, Captain, if you had made a different decision that day. It wasn't really a difficult choice, Admiral, Elena replied honestly. Not in my heart, at least. The hard part was convincing everyone else it was the right one. And now? Hale asked. Elena looked out at Kalen's ship, floating peacefully alongside human vessels for the first time, without the shadow of an approaching enemy fleet hanging over them. Now we have a chance to build something new, an alliance between two peoples who might never have met, if not for a choice made near a quiet red planet. Kalen joined them on the observation deck a short while later, his tired but hopeful eyes taking in the sight of human and Ashvari engineers working side by side on nearby damaged ships, laughing together despite the language differences that still occasionally caused confusion between them. "My people owe your captain a debt that can never fully be repaid," Kalen told Admiral Hale solemnly. She chose compassion when caution alone would have been the easier path. Few leaders, in any civilization across the stars, ever make such a choice when it truly matters most. "She has a habit of doing that," Hale said, glancing at Elena with a small, proud smile. "It's part of what makes her a good captain." In the months that followed, the alliance between humanity and the surviving Ashvari grew steadily stronger. Advanced medical technology helped revive the remaining survivors trapped in failing pods, while shared knowledge between the two peoples led to breakthroughs in shielding, propulsion, and communication that neither civilization could have achieved as quickly alone. More importantly, the alliance gave both peoples something they desperately needed: hope, and the knowledge that they were no longer facing an uncertain future, entirely alone in the vastness of space. Word of the Nixari threat spread carefully through Earth's leadership, sparking new efforts to prepare humanity's defenses, guided by hard-won knowledge shared freely by their new Ashvari allies. No one believed the danger was fully behind them. Kalen made it clear the scout fleet's defeat would eventually draw greater attention from the Nixari, and that a larger conflict might still lie somewhere ahead in the future. But for now, near the quiet red planet of Mars, where an ancient fleet had once slept in silence for hundreds of years, something new had been born, an alliance built not on conquest or fear, but on a single choice made by one human captain, who decided that compassion and courage mattered more than simple safety. Elena Reyes stood once more on the bridge of the Meridian, looking out at the peaceful sight of human and Ashvari ships working together in the calm quiet of space. Whatever challenges still lay ahead for both their peoples, she knew, deep in her heart, that they would face them together now, as allies, rather than as strangers passing silently in the endless dark. And that, she thought, watching the stars stretch out before her, was a future worth fighting for. A year after the battle near Mars, a small ceremony was held aboard a newly built station orbiting the Red Planet, a joint project between human and Ashvari engineers, designed to serve as a permanent symbol of the alliance forged in those desperate 9 days. Representatives from Earth's council stood alongside surviving Ashvari elders, including Kalen and Sira, both fully recovered now and thriving in their new partnership with humanity. Elena, promoted since the battle to command the growing joint defense fleet protecting the solar system's outer edges, stood at the center of the gathering, watching as a simple monument was unveiled, honoring both the human and Ashvari lives lost during the fight against the Nixari scout fleet. The monument bore names from both peoples, carved together in a single unbroken line, a visual reminder that this was, from that day forward, a shared history rather than two separate stories. "When my people first came to this system, searching for a place to hide and rest, we believed our story was ending," Kalen said during his address to the gathered crowd, his translated voice carrying clearly across the assembled group of humans and Ashvari alike. Instead, thanks to the courage and compassion of one human captain, and the many who stood beside her, our story continues, woven now together with yours. Sira, standing beside him, added her own words, her voice stronger and steadier than it had been during those first difficult days of her revival. "We came here, as the last remnants of a broken people, expecting only to fade away quietly, forgotten by the universe around us. Instead, we found something we had almost forgotten how to hope for, a future, built together, with new friends, who chose to see us as people worth saving, rather than simply a problem to be managed, or a resource to be used." Admiral Hale, now serving as the primary liaison between Earth's government and the growing Ashvari community settling within the solar system, spoke next, reflecting on how quickly attitudes had shifted since those tense early days of debate and uncertainty. "A year ago, many of us, myself included, Worried that this alliance might bring more danger to Earth than benefit, he admitted honestly. Today, I can say without hesitation that the opposite has proven true. The knowledge and friendship we have gained through this partnership has done more to prepare humanity for the challenges of the wider universe than 100 years of exploration alone might have achieved. As the formal ceremony concluded, smaller gatherings continued late into the evening. Human and HFY crew members sharing stories, food, and laughter in ways that would have seemed impossible to imagine just 1 year earlier. Jake Ferris, now leading a mixed squadron of human and HFY pilots, found himself sharing old flying stories with Torix over drinks that neither species had ever tasted before meeting the other, both of them laughing over the various translation mishaps that had occurred during their earliest training exercises together. Dana, meanwhile, walked through the newly constructed engineering bay with a group of young HFY apprentices eager to learn from her decades of experience, while she in turn peppered them with questions about ancient HFY technology, still waiting to be fully understood by human science. Elena found a quiet moment alone with Kalen near the station's main observation window, looking out at the combined fleet stationed nearby, human and HFY ships floating together in peaceful formation, rather than the desperate defensive lines they had once formed against a common enemy. "You look tired, Captain," Kalen observed gently. "Good tired, for once," Elena said with a small laugh. "It's strange, looking back at everything that's happened. A year ago, I was just the captain of a survey ship, mapping asteroids and checking old mining stations. Now look at all this." "Sometimes the smallest choices lead to the largest changes," Kalen said. "You chose to investigate a strange shadow near Mars, rather than simply reporting it and waiting for others to decide what to do. That single choice led to everything that followed." "I suppose it did," Elena admitted, looking out at the peaceful fleet before them. "Do you think the Nixari will come back? The main invasion force, I mean, not just another scout fleet." Kalen's expression grew more serious. "I believe they will, eventually. The scout fleet's defeat will not go unnoticed forever. But we are stronger now than we were, Captain, and growing stronger every day, thanks to what our two peoples have built together. Whatever comes next, we will not face it as strangers, or as separate, scattered survivors. We will face it together, as allies who have already proven we can win, even against terrible odds." "That's something, at least," Elena said. "It is everything," Kalen replied firmly. "It is the difference between facing an ending and building a future." As the evening wore on and the station's lights dimmed to mark the artificial night cycle both species had agreed to share, Elena found herself thinking back to that first strange reading on Marcus's sensor console, the massive shadow near Phobos that had changed the course of her life, and perhaps the course of humanity's future among the stars, forever. She thought of the choice she had made, again and again, throughout those first tense days, and the desperate battle that followed. The choice to investigate, rather than ignore, to communicate, rather than fear, to stand and fight alongside new allies, rather than retreat to easier, safer isolation. Each choice had been difficult in its own way, carrying real risk and real consequences. But looking out now at the peaceful alliance those choices had built, Elena felt no doubt that she would make the very same decisions again, exactly as she had before. Somewhere out among the distant stars, the Nixari swarm continued its endless hunger, and one day, perhaps sooner rather than later, that terrible enemy would return, in far greater numbers than the scout fleet humanity and its new allies had already defeated together. But for now, near the quiet red planet of Mars, where an ancient fleet had once slept in silence for hundreds of years, hope had taken root, strong and unwavering, carried forward by an alliance built on courage, compassion, and the simple, powerful choice of one human captain who refused to turn her back on those in need. And as Elena Reyes stood watching the stars stretch endlessly before her, surrounded by friends both human and HFY, she knew, with quiet certainty, that whatever challenges the future might bring, humanity would not face them alone, not anymore, not ever again. The story of the sleeping fleet near Mars, and the choice that had awakened both a nearly forgotten people and a new chapter in humanity's own history among the stars, would be remembered for generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength alone, but from the courage to choose compassion, even when the cost of that choice remains unknown.